met everyone, but I'll just let everybody know I'm Kathryn Fraser, and I'm a psychologist and behavioral science director down here in the Daytona Beach Family Medicine Residency Program in Florida. And been involved with STFM in various different shapes and forms, and just thrilled to be on this underrepresented in medicine project and taking the lead on the mentorship piece of the project. It's been a wonderful experience. We had 22 dedicated mentors and mentees last time, and our group did the best we could to put some structure and some training and opportunities to check in and so on. And we've really tried to build a community of early career and seasoned faculty to help improve the experience of underrepresented folks in academic family medicine. So, hi Jess, welcome. So I wanted to, we always get lots of feedback about how people enjoy kind of like the discussion part of the presentation. We normally wait till the end, but I'm gonna start with some of that today before we get into the nuts and bolts of the project. Welcome, Jake. So as I mentioned, a few people heard me say before, I wanted to use this first part of the project, the first part of the presentation to allow those of us who were on it in year one to talk about, you know, one really useful thing that they learned from the project last year and what their advice would be to new mentors coming on. So I'm going to ask, we'll start with our returning mentors, and then, like I said, I'll give the work group folks a chance to chime in. Before I do that, I'm going to ask the work group members to introduce themselves and say where you're from.
I'm George Saba. I'm a psychologist and family therapist, recently retired from the University of California, San Francisco, at Stanford General Hospital, and sort of semi-retired. I'm still on a callback, so I'm doing a little bit of stuff there, but I'm very excited to be part of this project. And I guess as most of you know, this for me is some fruition from when we started the group on minority health decades ago, and Denise Rogers and Cynthia Kim and Janet Townsend and Jose Revelo looked around with me in the lunchroom at STFM during a conference and saw that there were more people who were BIPOC serving us than actually were members. And as we started as an intervention, the group that now is a collaborative in 1990, the goal always was not only to increase the number of faculty, but to help people feel welcomed and that they belong, because attrition was really high in STFM. So this is one of the projects that's dear to my heart, and the reason I'm doing this after retirement. It feeds me. So thank you for letting me be part of this.
Hi, I'm Jess Gu. I'm the Associate Program Director at Swedish Cherry Hill, and was excited to join the group. Thank you to Kathryn for organizing us. I think I'm one of the earlier folks in my career, and just excited to be part of creating something for people that I wish I had when I was starting out. So thank you.
And I'm Cynthia Kim. I'm an Associate Program Director at the Mid-Hudson Family Medicine Residency Program, which is in Kingston, New York, about 90 miles north of New York City. I'm also behavioral science faculty. I'm a clinical social worker by trade, and I'm thrilled to be part of this work on a continuing basis. It's also very near and dear to my heart for many reasons, and I'm just grateful for the fellowship that comes out of this group. And like I said, finding joy in the work, continuing to find joy in the work always. So thank you for having me.
I'm Kim Savage. I'm Administrative Specialist at STFM, and I'm joining because Emily's on vacation. So I'm glad to have this opportunity to meet everyone and learn more about this program.
And we thank you for all you have done for us. All right, so I would love to get rolling. I'm just going to invite any of the returning mentors to jump in. And I will say, this group tends to have a lot of energy, a lot of things to say. Feel free to throw some stuff in the chat. We love that, and we'll do our best to monitor and sort of make comments and share the information. So, but any of the returning mentors who want to jump in, tell one thing that they learned from the project from last year, and what's your advice to the incoming mentors?
I'll jump in. Jeff Borkin, I'm Chair of Family Medicine at Brown and Assistant Dean. I think one of the things that was a surprise, at least this is once again what I heard and discussed with my mentee, the notion that DEI roles may be deleterious to the professional health of the holder. It's something I think that was a kind of eye-opening in terms of, wasn't an absolute statement, but the sense that unless it really led to professional advancement in another area, that it was of concern. And really enjoyed having a mentee who was at a very different stage, but at a neighboring institution, and also I think learned to go certainly at the mentee's pace rather than my own pace in terms of what we discussed.
Jake Bruneski, I'm in Wausau, Wisconsin. I'm Family and Community Medicine Assistant Dean for Clinical Learning here. I think the takeaways are things that seem obvious in retrospect, but are important. So, be available and be available and be available. And we'd scheduled meetings that sometimes got rescheduled, and they were fine. But some of the more important meetings were the just, oh my gosh, this thing is coming up, can you help? And some of the ad hoc interactions that we had that were timely and relevant to the challenges that my mentee was facing. And I think really listening and trying to not make assumptions. As Jeff was saying, my mentee's 3 years out of residency, has a very different set of lived experiences, different community around him, and that combination. There's all sorts of things that I just take for granted that everyone knows that this person didn't, and he found really valuable. And so I think just being really open to hearing what questions my mentee had was helpful, and then struck by I think the richness of interaction in virtual format, which wasn't what I had hoped for or expected in terms of, I thought we'd be meeting in person and being able to do more in the real world, but it was still a really valuable experience, I think, for both of us.
Thanks. Yes, I will say that availability is one of the things that mentees express that they want most. And I think you're talking about it in two different ways, Jake. Availability to have that physical phone call to them, but also that availability to listen and to do your best to relate and to realize the difference between your experiences, but rather than let that alienate you, let it kind of bring you together. So that availability is huge. That's really a lot of what mentees are looking for.
And totally that ability to listen and sit with the discomfort of the idea that you can't fix it for them, but you're there to listen.
Completely agree with that. I'm Michelle Rowett. I'm the Department Chair for Family Medicine at Georgetown University. I think this year has been a good one to think about mentorship in a different way for me. I typically have the mentoring role for early career faculty in my department and sometimes in the institution. And what was different about this, because we were, both Black women, was really identifying over the issues of the day and talking about our particular experiences and being open about those experiences. I think that's something that I don't think that I often recognized in the faculty that I work with at my own institution, unless they tell me that that's what they want to talk about. But I think there was an intention to that with this relationship, to bring it up and to make sure that my mentee knew that this was a safe space to talk about concerns. I also felt like building a mentorship network is something that I often talk about with mentees, but that it felt more especially important this last year. And I think I thought it was going to be challenging because I didn't know, her institution or, where she was or the people who she was working with. And I usually try to link mentees with additional mentors. But I think it worked out really well because it made her a little bit more attentive to who she was working with and who might be somebody who she could rely on as a mentor as well. And we would talk about it. And I really felt like those are really different perspectives and helped me to be a better mentor with others. And I think she really taught me a lot about looking at, whether my career aligns with my own personal values, because something that I talk to mentees a lot about, but I felt like she inspired me to keep looking at that for myself too. So I feel like the listening, the openness, the, talking openly about race and racial justice and racial injustices, I think was something new for me with a mentee, and that was really helpful. Mm-hmm.
So who from the work group wants to jump in and give just a kind of a brief summary or one point about something that they learned and would advise new mentors to do or be aware of? So I'll start. By no means do I want to dominate, but so one of the things that really struck me, and I see that Viviana has a question about who are the new mentors. Can everybody just raise your hand if this is your first time on the project? All right, welcome, yay. Absolutely. What struck me is how much is asked of early career folks in academic medicine, and especially with our underrepresented folks, how much they're asked to do. And Jeff gave a great example of the DEI work and how much that adds, and how difficult it is for people to say no, because we are held to a higher standard. We have to work harder and work stronger and look smarter than others to get to the places that folks who are not underrepresented can get to. And so there's a lot of pressure, and as mentors, I think it's important to understand that. And of course, this is the culture of medicine, of high achievers and type A folks. And I just think it's really important for us to remember the kind of stress that our early career folks live under and be open to hearing about that.
I think there's so much that could be said about that. I know one thing that I really took away from this process over the past year is just being with kindred spirits and like-minded people and not feeling so isolated and alone. Is kind of a theme that came up for our mentors, for our mentees, and I think for our work group members too. And I referenced that before when I said the word fellowship. That's exactly how I meant it. Just not feeling alone with things that can be very, very heavy to carry a lot of the time.
Yes, and I will say that some of the things that Michelle was talking about finding other mentors and building your network, the sense of community that I feel like we developed on this project was a really nice kind of side effect, and the mentees really appreciate that. And we do mentor check-ins and we do mentee check-ins, which is as many of the mentors who can make it as possible and a few of the work group members. And they really appreciate that, being able to relate to each other and so on. So they really value that sense of community. Yes, that sense of fellowship is incredibly sustaining. Jake, I'd have to agree with you.
I think one of the things for me was, and this was sort of maybe by design, but I mean, our notion of what we're trying to do is to focus on relationships that people are in and how to work in relationships and to accept the interconnectedness that we all are part of. And the one piece that came clear was the importance of trust and the building of trust between the mentors and the mentees. And it doesn't come automatically. It may come for some people easier than others, But there was that first phase that I think many mentors in our check-ins talked about. That I don't know this person, they don't know me. We have to have some kind of startup. It's going to take time. We got to invest in that beginning part, not rush trying to do too much, trying to get some product done without really realizing we have to trust each other as two human beings and build that connection. And not only wondering like, well, what might the mentee not tell me or not be telling me that I need to know to help them, but also for the mentors to say, you know, I went through the same thing at that age, at that stage, in that way. And I'm not sure I'm ready to tell my story yet. So there was a development over the year, and I just wanted to stress the importance, because I think I think a lot about this with learners and of course with patients and issues of mistrust and the way the whole hierarchy of medicine is set up it was just important for me to appreciate that it was part of this process as well.
Thanks. Agreed.
Along those lines, George, something that I've been thinking a lot about recently is how do we apply the pillars of trauma-informed care to our education, recognizing that so many of our learners and so many of our academics, faculty, have experienced sort of professional and educational trauma and continue to. It's been a really interesting construct, I think, similar to what you're talking about, and how do we heal from our own traumas so that we can help be their best for the next generation.
All right, so we actually are just a few precious minutes ahead of time. We are a small group. Those of us returning on the project all got to say who we are and where we are from. So why don't we take the next few minutes and have our new mentors who are just joining the group to say your name and where you're from and what you do.
I can start. I am Kristen Hood-Watson, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Resident Inclusion at Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm also the Director of Medical Education in Family Medicine and work very closely with STFM in the Medical Education Committee. So I'm excited to be joining, and several of you I have already worked with over the years. So again, yeah, I'm excited to be a part of this.
Bill Cayley. I've been at a community-based program, and I spent half my time at our rural clinic in western Wisconsin for about 20 years. So about half my work is just general primary care. I've been involved with STFM for 20 years as well. I didn't really have a whole lot of early career mentoring myself, and so just kind of got into doing a bunch of different things, writing and other projects myself, and so thought I would have benefited from some mentoring, so hope to pay it forward a bit. And you can probably see over my shoulder, 2 of my 3 girls are from Ethiopia, one of whom says she wants to be a doctor. I believe that about 50% right now. So our family is struggling the whole, both mentoring a teen, but also figuring out her identity, which is complicated on a whole bunch of levels. So part of this is thinking is that, sort of a pay it forward to future generations as well.
I'm Viviana Martinez Bianchi. I'm a, I was going to say I'm a family doctor. I've been doing so many presentations that I forget that you all know that. So I'm Director for Health Equity in the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health. Until last June, a year ago, I was the Director of the Family Medicine Residency Program at Duke University. And I'm also in the executive board of WONCA, the World Organization of Family Doctors. I did have great mentors. They were not members of, historically, what was the name that my friends were using? Excluded from medicine groups. But they actually made me feel that I would be welcome in medicine. That was actually the reason for immigration for me. I'm an immigrant from Argentina, and I moved to the US when I was heavily recruited by white clinicians who were saying we need people like you in medicine here. but also my mentors have guided me even to where I am with Wonka, where I've been at Duke, the work I'm doing right now with the Department of Health and Human Services in North Carolina. Often it was this like inner drive and then the direction that a mentor will say, hey, did you look at that? And so I hope that I can be of support for others. And at the same time, I'm afraid of the time commitment, not for me, for others. You know, will I have enough of the time that a mentee will need from me?
Hi, I'm Anna Tovar, and I'm a clinical psychologist and the behavioral science faculty in a family medicine program in York Hospital. That's in central Pennsylvania. I've been doing that for about 25 years, so for most of my career. I had good mentors when I was in the mental health arena earlier in my career, and you know, had to really learn things on my own when I entered medical education. I remember my first faculty meeting, they were talking about ACGME and, you know, all these other names and acronyms that I had no idea what they were, but, you know, slowly but surely I came to learn. So I also serve on DEI committees for our larger health system. And have been doing a lot of that work and education later in my career. So I'm very interested in seeing how I can be a support and potentially a guide for you know, someone who may be feeling similar to the way that I felt when I first started out in the area of graduate medical education.
All right, so we will go ahead and get started on the presentation. I'm going to share my screen. So welcome everyone to Mentoring Underrepresented Faculty for Academic Medicine. That's our phrase, so we'll continue to use it. We love the spirit of Viviana's reframe. And I've introduced everyone to you. We also work with Emily Walters at STFM and she's on vacation, and Kim graciously stepped into her spot. So what we are about is creating a project that allows our early career folks to be able to discuss the difficult challenges of being in underrepresented groups and trying to make it in this very challenging and competitive field of academic medicine. And a couple of folks have alluded to the importance of them being able to talk about racism, marginalization, different things that affect them, their feelings about what's going on in the country and in the world, that kind of thing, really creating that safe space for that. So today we're going to talk about what we are hoping that you'll be able to provide as mentors. We'll talk about the concept of meta-mentorship, and that is where the mentors come together and really mentor each other under the guidance of the work group. We'll be planning to give you some tips and talk about a mentee action plan, which will help the mentee structure their time over the year. And so I'll be basically giving an overview of what the project will look like. Interestingly enough, we actually started developing the project, even though we started formally in August of 2020. We started meeting with the mentors before that, and we started planning the project about 6 months before that. So that was before the George Floyd murder. And we were coming into our trainings and really thinking about, and of course before coronavirus, we were coming into the trainings thinking about, you know, wow, we have these two huge major phenomenon, and how will they affect our project? And in some ways, you know, it felt overwhelming to me to plan a project like this with this kind of thing going on. And in other ways, it felt like exactly the right time to do it. And I would say, I think feeling like it was the right time to do it and to be able to give voice to the stress and the anger, the frustration, the magnification of health disparities in our country, you know, being able to bring a group together to be able to safely talk about those kinds of issues turned out to be a really important phenomenon, a really important part of our project. So that was a year ago. Flash forward to today, we've certainly had some more hopeful experiences in terms of racial equality and diversity and so on. And there's no doubt that tragically George Floyd lost his life, and hopefully and gladly we are making some advances. We're having more conversations and seeing some real concrete changes. So we hope to continue to provide the avenue for our early career folks to be able to talk about these things, and for us to continue to grow in these areas of health equity and diversity, and really uplifting our early career URM folks. So we like to give homage to some of our major resources. We've developed quite a few materials on MUFA, but I definitely want to show respect and gratitude for those who came before us. So we have many resources to offer, and these were some of the major ones that we used to plan the project. So there's the teaching about racism in the context of persistent health and healthcare disparities. And many of us on this call were actually there for that presentation. And some of us developed it. It grew out of a workshop a few years ago, which I kind of feel like really had an impact on how we teach about racism and talk about health disparities, and was the beginning of some really beautiful work. The mentorship toolkit, supporting mentors and mentees, that is from the University of Wisconsin, and that has really nice lists of tips for mentors and mentees, and was a major part of us planning this project. And then the Enhancing Mentorship for Underrepresented Minority Family Medicine Faculty. So that one is the project that Judy Washington and Jose Gonzalez, Rodriguez planned, and they work on helping people, early career URM folks who are interested in scholarship. It's a tremendously successful project, and they're now an actual fellowship. And so they also had a handbook that we drew heavily from. And so just wanted to mention those to you, and those are in our reference list.
Our mentorship work group, it's sort of the vision and mission that we sort of started off with, was sort of this idea that we know that URM, historically excluded in medicine, especially the junior faculty in skills and perspective, are frequently under-recognized, underappreciated, and untapped. And this is in the context of social constructs in our society that lead to privilege and inequity. And that sort of intersection of sort of the difficulty of starting an early faculty career, in addition to those sort of societal constructs, creates inequities in the academic environment that pose unique threats to the success of URM folks. Dismantling inequity requires us to be proactive. And so this was one of the main tenets that we sort of thought about when we tried to create this project, that we have seen time and time again that we don't naturally evolve to more equity. That's something that we have to do community and self-work on. And that strong mentoring is one of those proactive tools to help folks get to that path of excellence. So that's sort of where we started from and kind of inspired our work. So what were our then goals, and how did we crystallize this together? So ultimately the goal was to have authentic and cultural representation in academic medicine. And through this mentorship project, we hope to have helped address privilege, inequity, and injustice and missed opportunities, recognizing that mentorship sort of creates a multifactorial intervention for many of our junior faculty. You know, it's emotional support, it's professional support, it's access to a network, it's sort of just teaching people the unspoken code, and helping them both sort of have that general support, but also helping them identify specific roadblocks and challenges that sometimes they have identified themselves, but also sometimes don't even realize are there, or don't even realize that there are solutions for. Certainly, as Kathryn mentioned, we're building upon you know, much work by our colleagues on racial inequity and mentoring. with the ultimate hope that not only can we get, like our URM numbers to be higher, to have higher retention, but to really have our junior faculty blossom into junior faculty, senior faculty, so that they can come to work and be sort of their fullest selves and offering to society their fullest skills and potential.
So this is the overview of our plan. And just to expand a little bit on what I mentioned initially with the URM initiative. So the URM initiative has 4 programs that are going on right now, and it's designed to be a 3-year project where we focus in on these various issues, including scholarship and leadership, and also the URM pipeline. So this is really going into the second, going into the 3rd year. It's the 2nd year of MUFA. And so we plan to run this project for 2 years. And so we have the components of the mentor training. I call it the quintuple M, it's the 5 M's. The mentor training, mentee training, giving them guideposts and so on. And then we carefully match the mentors and mentees as best we can to suit their needs. We monitor the progress of the project, and we're going to be getting into some articles and different things. We did a presentation at STFM last year. And then they want us to be able to make the project sustainable. And we're not sure what form that will look like after this year of mentorship, possibly moving towards more of a coaching format. But we want to be able to keep all the things that we've learned and put together on this project and make that a part of the fabric of STFM as best we can, so that we have this well-researched, evidence-based approach to mentorship for early career URM folks. So what I have done, I did this last year, and I also reached out this year, and we came up with some thoughts on what are really the challenges in academic medicine. And I just put it out there and I said, what reasons have you almost quit academic medicine? A couple of people said they never thought of quitting, which is really nice. But we wanted to get at what were the challenges, the things that were sort of make or break things. So poor work-life balance, we know how demanding these jobs are, difficulty with learners not being interested, poor leadership, various political issues. Many people felt misunderstood, and that their leadership did not understand the importance of health equity issues. Someone mentioned taking a salary decrease to go to teaching, and I suppose ultimately the love of teaching kept them there. Unfair decisions based on bias. With that poor work-life balance, the drive to produce scholarly activity and how untenable that can seem sometimes. Outright racism, leadership resistant to feedback on different things going on, lack of support, not being able to receive resources. You know, another thing I learned a lot on the project last year is the lack of support for those of us who are interested in issues of health equity and racism and community-based health, and that sometimes those kinds of projects are not highly valued in academic settings, and that makes it difficult for folks to really feel appreciated and feel like a valued part of their system. So again, you know, just a lot of feedback on difficulty with work-life balance and so on, and dealing with multiple demands. And this exercise helps us think about where our mentees are coming from and where they are in their professional lives.
And so when we sort of think about, you know, like, how is this mentorship project going to be different than other mentorship projects? What is it about being a URM that is specific, and how can we improve the mentorship project to address those needs? And I think that the main thing that I think about when we try to think about this is all of the layers that get added on when you have an identity that's outside of the majority. And so, and the sort of both physical and emotional burdens that places, or the extra work that places. So when we sort of think about, and we've talked with sort of early URM folks, reflected with folks like you on what happened for you when you were junior faculty, certainly the experience of alienation in the academic setting, I think, is incredible, and feeling like not only are you maybe one of the onlys at your program or department, but in addition to that, this feeling that when you come to work, you perhaps can't be your fullest self. And that's another side of that alienation that I think people feel. Overcoming barriers to promotion and tenure. I think that many folks have sort of alluded to that already. There was a gentleman, I think he's not here anymore, but he has sort of talked about how DEI work actually can be a promotion, can be a barrier to promotion and tenure because you're not given credit for it and it's extra work that you're doing. And obviously, and typically it's work that we do that is emotionally taxing. I think that there's other things, as one of the other participants mentioned, that she tends to be the default mentor for everyone. And I found that already, that even as junior faculty, I have a whole cohort of medical students and other things that come through, and that is not something that's frequently recognized. In addition to all of the additional sort of like work that you have to do to put in to navigate the systems that exist, that we sort of coin as a minority tax, but really can take the form of, you know, formal things like I just discussed, but even that sort of informal of like how much extra energy it takes for you to come to meetings, to have your ideas heard, or to sort of have to code switch all the time, I think just takes that toll. And similarly, sort of learning the unspoken rules of success and professionalism. And this isn't to say that, you know, like white folks don't have to learn these as well. But I think along the lines of mentoring that we notice is that because, I guess when there aren't as many, when we're already underrepresented to begin with, mentorship in general tends to be relatively informal, right? It takes someone who's more advanced in their career to sort of take an interest in a younger person. And typically those interests come from someone who reminds you of yourself or someone who sort of speaks to an interest of you. And so I don't think that there's a lot of sort of like people out there who are saying explicitly to themselves, oh, I'm going to refuse to mentor URM folks. But I think that that sort of unconscious interactions that we have, on average, URM folks are not given the same level of mentorship. There's just not as many people who are going to informally pull them aside and sort of say like, hey, during that meeting, it might have been helpful if you'd done it this way. Or, hey, I heard that there's this opportunity here. Send me your resume so I can take a look at it and see if there's any way that I can tweak it. And so all of those unspoken rules of success and professionalism, everyone has to be taught. I think URM folks tend to learn it less often, but then I think there are also sometimes special skills that we also have to learn how to navigate that are different. You know, like how do I now present myself as a queer Asian woman at the table might be different, and how do I present that effectively as compared to some of my, say, like white cis male colleagues.
So the role of the meta mentorship, I think one of the things that we talked about early on in trying to develop this program was how to help create a context for all of everybody who's doing mentoring to be able to build a community in which they can work together and share and learn from each other, and also not feel so alienated and kind of on their own, trying to figure out what to do in a particular situation with a mentee. So we developed this sense that we are part of, there are some differences between us and the people that we're mentoring. And it might be nice to have time and some intentionality to share what the process has been like through this mentoring year with each other. I think one of the things that I found, and some of you who went through it, it was not only, and we've alluded to this a little bit, but it was not only sort of sharing some of the challenges or struggles that were happening during the year with a mentee, but also what was happening in the country. Just to be able to talk to somebody else about being, how am I a clinician in the midst of COVID in month 12? And how am I a teacher in the midst of all the stuff that's happening in politics in our country? How do I take care of myself, etc.? So it was just important. Not only were we talking about the nuts and bolts of actual mentoring, but really just how do we help each other a little bit and feel connected in some way? Because a lot of people were feeling isolated from the people that they work with, even more so, I think, because of what was happening. So the role of mentorship is really for us to provide some support, some guidance. People would come and ask questions like, how do I handle this? My mentee asked this question of me. Do I respond this way? Do I not? I've never had this question. I don't know this area very well. What do people do? Have you run into this in some ways that I can be helpful? Also to challenge ourselves to grow through the process. So not necessarily feel like we got this all together. And I think a lot of the mentors felt like they were challenged in different ways. Often it was questioning of what do I have to offer if I'm not Black or Indigenous or a person of color? If I'm a white person, what do I have to, or I'm of a different gender, or I'm not a physician, or I'm not doing the area of research that they need or want. How do I still find a way to help? And that we find our own ways, our own places of growth that we want to through this. For the group to be a sounding board, that there's some things that somebody wants to try or suggest, like to be able to run that by the group and get ideas. Challenging issues that came up, and I know some of you on the call now who last year faced that, like people making, their mentees making life decisions, whether I change my job or not, or I really feel so much prejudice from the people that I'm working with. Do I stay there or do I not do it? Do I take on more responsibilities? I'm being offered something important, something I would like to do, but what about all of this stuff and how does it affect me, affect the time that I have outside of that? Also, the issues that come up between yourselves and the mentees were something that we also wanted to be a place where people could bring it up, like, well, I don't know if we're getting along so well. I've made a number of calls and they haven't responded. Or this other thing, the question I think Viviana mentioned, perhaps, about like feeling welcomed and how to have that come through the group and that important piece of it. And also and people were worried a little bit, like, am I bothering them too much? I have a resource I'd like to send them. Do they need another email? We just talked about how busy they were and overwhelmed. So addressing some of the issues that may come up. And then in some ways that we provide some accountability for ourselves, that this isn't just to you and your mentee off on your own and trying to struggle through things, but we try and get some sense that we are developing a community that's accountable to one another. And I think that's been helpful because some people would be talking on these mentorship calls and say, well, I've met with my person every month. And now it's the 4th time we've met, and and other people go like, we've only had a couple meetings. I need to reach out. Something's not going well because something's not, we're not meeting as frequently as everybody else seems to be. Some tips. There's thousands, y'all can jump in on this stuff, but one, acknowledging and addressing the fact that race matters. I mean, we've said that's the hallmark of this mentorship program, is that it accepts and acknowledges that racism is present and that it is part of all of our work and all of our relationships, and to just be upfront about it. Now, one of the things that we learned when we were talking about, like, what we learned, there were some relationships where the mentee said, yes, that's true, but I have other mentors to deal with racism. I want you to help me with qualitative analysis on this research project. That's what I'm really needing right now. And so we don't have to get into that stuff. But many other people also wanted to get into dealing with how they were feeling and how they were being treated and how systemic racism was operating in their place and stuff. So, but acknowledging that that's there, And whether people want to deal with it or not, it's their choice with you. This, constant reflection and acceptance of our own implicit biases and becoming even more aware of them is as we know, is a lifelong thing. And so a lot of time of work on ourselves is an important part of this process. I think it's been helpful to be open to input and requests from mentees. It takes a bit of deep listening, like what do people really want? So much of my work starts out with, well, I've got 40 years of experience. Let me start telling you what you need and how I can get you promoted and how I can do this and how I can do that. And just really like, what does somebody need right now? Maybe they need time with their family. Maybe that's what they want to talk about. And then being aware of identity and background. I think Viviana's got identity up there, and I can't read the bottom, except literally a crown. I can't. But being aware of identity and background, same for the mentee, and with similarities and differences and how those intersect. So call topics. Thank you, Viviana, for in the chat. There's once you get started, you'll figure out what to talk about. But initially, it's helpful to figure out some set of goals or plan for the year. To discuss the action plan that the mentees filled out and some academic projects that they want to work on. I was actually talking with somebody who I'm kind of involved in a mentoring project, and that was one of the first things they said is, I really, I'm here to serve the patients. I'm a new faculty, I'm here to teach. But when I filled out to get this job, I had to fill out a CV, and the UCSF CV has all of these areas in order to get promoted that I didn't even know existed. What do I do about that? And here's something that I'm, some areas of interest that I have, but how do I turn that into something that's going to show up at promotion and is going to mean something and is going to be what's important to me? Talking again about effects of racism, oppression, marginalization, and last year, as those of you know, there was something happening every week that people sometimes had and wanted to deal with. To just talk about, because things were happening so intensely and so quickly. Helping people figure out advancement and promotion and addressing the barriers. I think Jess mentioned that the white people have to learn this. It is true, but it takes white people to teach you this, teach the other white people this, and that's kind of in place if you come from a scholarly or academic place, or you have the privilege, you think, to go up and ask about it and go meet with your chair and say, what do I got to do? I never thought I had the permission to meet with my chair about this stuff. So there is a code book, and every university or setting might be different. And so helping people figure that out, figure out the organizational system that they're in and how to move through that. And the bind, and we'll talk about this, is that the white supremacy sets up the promotion system in a way that is racist. And so the complexity of this is how to help someone move through advancement and promotion, and at the same time not feel like they're selling them their soul. Self-care. You can talk about where people are at with that, and you'll hear my comments over time, but self-care, when it's seen from a individualistic or even a supremacist view, it's on the individual. Like, you got to do this. This is up to you. Why aren't you taking care of yourself? Go do some yoga, meditate or pray. If the system is the one that's caring for one another, then all the self-care in the world ain't going to help you. But it's really going to be helping, I think, in the call, helping people figure out what do they need, where are they not feeling like they're cared for and cared, and how to help them find those ways, what has worked for them in the past, but not to necessarily say, this is something, one other burden you need to deal with, because that's not a helpful way to think about it, I don't think. And then finally, as we've talked about, is how to, what is the professional network and their support? Do they have any? And how can we set that up? And one of the ideas that came out of last year was there might be other mentors in this group as you get to know each other. Let's say there is a qualitative researcher and you're not. So you link them up with that person. They can also mentor them too during this. Or somebody who's an expert in another clinical area. So helping build that could be something that, but first finding out what do people have, what do they want, what do they need? And it's just food for thought. Mostly it's getting to know each other, finding a way, if you can, to trust each other and build a relationship.
So the Mentee Action Plan, as we've alluded to a little bit earlier in this presentation, was really meant to help provide a little bit of structure and accountability. In our heads, we can have lots of lofty goals, but if we can make things more concrete and create a roadmap, as Kathryn shared at the outset, it really helps us make sure we're staying on track, identify barriers, identify resources that are needed to be successful. And we got some really great feedback the first go around from our mentors and our mentees about this utility. So the mentee sort of reviews their professional needs and goals. And there's sort of this brainstorming process, a nice back and forth between mentor and mentee to really identify some tentative goals and objectives. Thinking about how to build on their strengths, right? We don't want to characterize our mentees as helpless or disempowered completely. They already have tremendous strengths that they bring to the table that has helped them survive and hopefully somewhat thrive in whatever they've been doing so far. So it's just really sort of building on whatever foundation an individual already has. And like I said, identifying those barriers or obstacles, but also identifying the resources that are needed to be successful. And it provides a nice kind of long view. It doesn't have to be written in stone. It doesn't have to be adhered to rigidly, but it can provide a really nice structure and point of reference to kind of go back to and say, okay, this is what I thought I wanted to be working on. How am I doing with that? How's that going? So also a really, really important discussion point. What's one thing that your mentor did when we asked mentees and surveyed mentees? What was one thing that was super helpful in not only trying to ensure success, and I always say not just survive, but thrive, right? What helped you really kind of feel fulfillment in this? And various different themes. Knowing that STFM is a professional home for many of us, and that, again, it consists of a lot of like-minded folks and a lot of kindred spirits. And so really embracing that and encouraging people to get involved if they're not already, or to really explore the full capacity that STFM has to support this work and support us all in our other academic settings. Helping facilitate reporting of unethical behavior. There are a lot of issues around safety, a lot of themes around safety. And so many people, like I was sharing an example at the very outset of this meeting, many of our BIPOC folks believe and are treated in a way that they have to mask. And part of that masking sometimes means laughing at an inappropriate joke, right? Ignoring a microaggression, ignoring microaggression after microaggression after microaggression. And really, where's the safety in being able to report things that don't sit well, that create barriers, unnecessary barriers, and that are outright unethical? All of it is unethical, but especially some glaring things. How is that reported? What is the chain of command? What is the process? So being able to identify that was something that was very much valued by mentees and their relationships. Facilitation, what do you enjoy? Like, what makes you you outside of the work that you do? And again, that goes back to that issue of sort of work-life integration, work-life balance, but not losing one's sense of joy and one's sense of identity in the work, but also in one's life. How to write clearly with intention, with intentionality. This is really important because the pathways that are created for individuals with undeserved privilege are not the same if they're created at all, for BIPOC individuals in academic family medicine. So how to express one's goals, how to express one's objectives in a clear and intentional way, without apology, without shortcomings, without self-sabotaging, but just to really be clear and straightforward about that. We talked about work-life balance and how that was an important theme. And I always joke that there's no such thing as work-life balance, it's work-life integration. How do you make life integrate, your personal life integrate with the work that you have to do, and vice versa? Honesty and giving critical feedback. This is something that's difficult for everyone to do, to give really straightforward, clear, directive, corrective feedback about something, and how to navigate when one is met with defensiveness or hostility or gaslighting, how to address those sorts of issues that come up when feedback is necessary. Recognition, encouragement, participation, collaboration on projects. It was a wonderful opportunity for mentees to not just learn from their mentors about navigating these waters, but also how to get involved where there are like interests and like passions, and sharing that joy to, again, not just survive, but thrive. Being able to say yes in authentic and in a way that's going to preserve one's integrity and not contribute yet another layer to that minority tax. And when to say no, as Kathryn aptly pointed out earlier on. And sometimes saying yes also means saying no, and sometimes saying no can mean yes in certain ways. So it's about finding that balance. Had faith, offered guidance, validation of work, encouraging people, you're planting seeds. We all hope that we get to see those seeds come to fruition, but sometimes it almost has to be enough to know that the work we do and the way that we carry ourselves through the world in our workplace, we're going to plant seeds, we're going to create pathways for other individuals, and that goes for mentors and mentees, and having faith in the process and sticking with it, no matter how difficult it gets at times. The idea to gather, not just formally for meetings and things like that, but to have that real convivial sort of informal connection all the time, even when you're not in touch. Validating the importance of medical student education, right? Starting early. We can't start this work early enough. We know, I think, again, as Kathryn said, that there is just an inherently toxic culture in medical education. I think that's undeniable. And so really starting this process early on and changing the system from the inside out by looking at all levels of learning and engagement with the learning. Availability, confidentiality, transparency, those all contribute to that aura of safety that we're talking about. Concrete suggestions for improvement. If advice is asked, here's something that can be done. Here's what worked for me. What do you think would help? But being able to give some advice. Some of us are reluctant to give advice at times, but concrete suggestions for things that could be improved upon or directions to follow. Opening doors, paying it forward, reaching back and helping pull others forward with you, and encouraging leadership, because it is only through BIPOC academicians and clinicians getting into leadership positions that we can really effectively change the system from the inside out and remove and decolonize the tokenism that has happened in academic family medicine, unfortunately, to a lot of our BIPOC colleagues. So all important themes.
So I'm going to actually go over the project timeline very quickly, and I'll do more of this through an email, actually, because I do want to have us, let us have time to do small groups. So July, we got our first mentor training. August, mentor training number 2 on difficult conversations about racism and race and so on. We'll do the pairings in August. In September, this time, we're going to actually do a combined mentor-mentee orientation. That was a new idea where we're going to get the entire group together and get to know each other and do some collaborating, skill building, that kind of thing. Mentor training webinar 3. And at that time, we'll have you complete the mentee action plan. And everybody should have gotten a copy of it in the email. I do want to say a lot of that was the brainchild of Cynthia. I want to give her lots of credit for that, and you can certainly ask us if you have questions, and we'll give you some instructions on that. So between then and April, continue monthly calls with the mentee. So we hope for monthly calls throughout the year of the project. We have 2 meta mentorship calls designated, one for December, one for April. I think last year we ended up doing 3. So possibly those dates will change. We might add another one. We might also do another joint mentor-mentee call. And then in May next year, the annual conference, we hope to get us all together. And then the parents go from August to August. So even beyond our meeting at the annual conference, we will have, you'll still have a few months to be working with your mentee. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'll give you the instructions and then we'll stop screen sharing for a bit. So we'd like to break into smaller groups and really give our new folks the opportunity to talk about what they hope to get out of the project. And we want our returning folks to also jump in and share on that, maybe what brought them back to the project. And at the end, we'll all come together and debrief on it.